can I just ask one question? Because I was taken back by it in the opening statement when you stated that the birth mothers are met by the invisible iron fist of Tusla. No, that's a red flag straight away, you know? And you said that Tusla social workers, when they notify Tusla management about failures to comply with the national standards for children in foster care, if you were blunt and explained that, could you give me, you know, a blunt, no, remind me when I say blunt, but don't be that blunt because we are in public session, but just a blunt explanation on when you mean by an iron fist. Is it the dismissive? Is it, it's not your job, it's none of your business, go away, or is it all?
I will. When we say an iron fist, we don't usually mean physical violence, although the physical taking of a child is an act of physical intervention. The iron fist is usually administrative in nature. I'll give you an example. I will do everything my best not to identify anybody in this. As a social care practitioner, a 17-year-old girl became pregnant in a service that I worked in. I attended a meeting one day where it was announced to us that the social work team had decided that this child, 6 months before the child was born, was going to go into care. What was read out next was a report that was completely falsified, that stated that this particular girl, whilst in our residential care, for 5 weeks did not take the child, this is later on at a secondary meeting, did not take the child to the hospital to be seen. And that was the reason that the absolute decision was then being made to take the child into care. That was a falsified report. It was ultimately, it would have been our duty to take that baby down to the hospital if the baby was sick, which the baby was not sick. I sat at a table with 5 other professionals who all knew that this was untrue, but kept nodding their head. And the reason was, it was a private company that we worked for. And they depended on the contracts and the checks from this social work team. So no matter what injustice, no matter what breach of people's personal rights or law occurred, it would never be raised by professionals who had gone through an academic process which taught them and inculcated them to raise these issues and to follow their values that they were taught in college. So the iron fist has a gentle visual about it, that it's a piece of paper quite often, but it is so damaging. Another example of the iron fist is the use of funding as an excuse for everything. We don't have the funding, that's why X, Y, or Z. Funding had nothing to do with falsifying that document. Funding had nothing to do with most of the things that mothers come to us about, and that are not measured by HICWA, because HICWA looks at statistics, quantitative data, a desktop operation, but they don't hear the genuine, horrific stories from mothers and from quite often, from fathers as well quite often. That's not, there's on both cases here. So the fist is an administrative one, and yet it can be the most damaging. If somebody hits somebody a punch in the face, you can get over that. But if somebody drags you through a court, tells lies about you, destroys your persona within your community. We have known mothers that have taken their lives because of these processes, and fathers who have taken their lives. And it is gut-wrenching to witness it, so to go through it must be something horrific. I personally was in an orphanage for 4 years, and I can tell you how that impacts, and I'm an educated and a balanced man, but how that impacts your personality development from day one until the day you die in terms of how you feel about yourself in the world. Because you will, as a baby and as a child, you don't see that the system did this. You think your mother did this, that your mother handed you up willy-nilly, and that follows you through life. And it causes drug addiction into the future, it causes alcoholism, a lack of personal faith in the self, all of those things. So the iron fist is not an actual usual fist of violence. It's administrative processes that are designed to oppress so that the family becomes the problem. So many times working in social care, I've never once come across a case where we try to actually unify a family. Quite the opposite. And whenever a mother was coming down for access with her children, the eyes would be thrown, oh, we have to organise this again, like it's a problem. It's a problem. And that the families become the problem. And yet, so many times, what's not needed is €1 million for this child over 3 years. What's needed is a bit of human understanding, more than anything else. And just to be human beings and to try different things. I know one case of a man who's a friend of mine who's blind. And Tusla put on paper that he could not keep his child because he was blind. We eventually got private assessments done. And the assessors could not believe this man. This man could do everything with no eyes. He could change the baby, he could feed the baby, he could do everything. And they were shocked. But Tusla still were not happy. He put in a complaint 5 years ago. That complaint still isn't sorted out. In fact, that complaint is held against him. That's the problematic. It is cultural wide. You have two types of values, when I said espouse values. You have espouse values, which is what you read on paper, all the really lovely things. But then you have the real beliefs and values that happen on the ground in the place. And HICWA do not assess or collate the data from the real things that happen on the ground. Yeah. It's a desktop operation. Thank you for your time. I
thank you for your answer, and a fairly in-depth answer, I have to say.
Thank you.
And I always have a worry that privatisation is for profit and not for duty of care.
Yeah.
And it seems to be across a lot of departments. But